is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Iron Druid, Book 2, Hexed, chapters 14, 15, and 16. In these chapters, Atticus gets proposed to in the most amusing fashion, which even caught me off guard. And we finally get a face-to-face encounter with that creepy-ass Catholic priest and rabbi. I don't know what to make of these two. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So welcome back, those of you who have been interested in me continuing on Iron Druid. It has been a minute. I want to say thank you to Rosalie for commissioning this episode. I know that some people were feeling like I hated the books, and that is not true. I definitely have problems with the books, but I think the books are still a lot of fun, and I wanted to keep reading. I just it's been, I think, since October at this point, since anybody has commissioned any more of it. So, and these next 3 chapters were a lot better. It was, mainly in the last, the beginning of this book, honestly, that most of my issues were cropping up because of Atticus's attitude and this weird, quasi-sex, rape scene with Mab. And this section, I get a pretty satisfying turnaround in that Atticus puts his foot down with Brighid, which is really gratifying to read. He handles himself super well. And so I'm feeling good about these 3 chapters. So let's get started, shall we? I had to refresh myself, so I reread the last 2 chapters before this section begins to remind myself what's going on and that he made that deal with Mab, that he would help her to create the amulet and the magic that can protect her from a lot of different types of magic. And the whole thing that's going on with these 2 weirdos that keep showing up to do something. They're trying to track Atticus down for reasons unknown. They seem really particularly interested in these rare books that he has locked up and also enchanted. There's bindings and wards on the cabinets that he's keeping them in. And there's the Maynard issue, which he had agreed to help with, but then was given the wrong info on how many there would be. So that turned out to be quite a bloodbath, actually. So that's to get you all up to date if you had forgotten where we were in this. And chapter 14 starts right after, it's so precious in its weird way. Atticus tells Mab that in order to make this, this magic that is fused with iron, because iron is a metal that inherently resists magic, you need to make friends with an iron elemental, a metal elemental. And poor Mab, you can ask a lot of her. She has a lot of abilities and powers, but this bitch has never been friendly. She's not somebody who knows how to do that. She doesn't know how to relate to people. She doesn't know how to extend an olive branch or behave in a welcoming manner. That is not an advantage that she has. And when he tells her that that's going to be the way to take the next step, she essentially is all right, well, thanks for trying, and I guess we're done here. And he's hey, hold on, you can do this. It's just different than what you're used to doing. And she's no, I can't do this. And this chapter begins right after he's you can do this. And look, you can test on me. I will be your guinea pig on how to be friends with somebody. And just as he says that, she's thank you very much for everything. I'm out. And she grabs all of her stuff and leaves in this really abrupt way that makes him think that she has left because she is so kind of either moved or alarmed by his overture of friendship. But this chapter begins disabusing him of that notion, because it turns out she's bailing because Bridget's here. And, spoiler alert, Brighid is, God, moody is the wrong word. Brighid is impulsive. She is a disaster, frankly, in this chapter. So she shows up here looking hot as all get out, in this like gown that barely leaves anything to the imagination, with her hair tousled and she's just got the full like, vamp act going here, where she's just trying to seduce him and being really obvious and forward about it. So it's clear that this is like part of what Mab was doing here. Because Atticus realizes that the sex that he had with Mab was so intense that there's no way he's going to be able to have sex again today. And she left her mark on him, very literally. She scratched the fuck out of him and like beat him up in order to leave no doubt in Brigid's mind who he was with just now. So it's a really like, it recontextualizes the other scene where she's so aggressive with him, where it's like, it doesn't make it any less like, I hesitate to call it rape in some ways, because he was like, I think he was consenting. I didn't reread the sex scene, but it just felt so like creepy, borderline icky to me. But it makes it so that whole scene, it's less about her doing this because like it's gratifying to her and she gets off on it, than because it's a part of her overall plan to undermine Brighid, which does not make it better, but it changes the way I see it a little bit. Not to say that her being gratified by it is not a factor at all, because I certainly believe it is. Mab just seems like that type. So Brighid shows up. I was so shocked, you guys, when I read this part. I was like, the part where he spits his beer out was pretty much me, because I just never expected this at all. So she's doing her whole like sultry seductress thing, using a voice that like really makes an impression on him. And just in general, kind of like slithering and swaying through the room. And then there's the moment where she's just like, basically, so Brez was awful, and I really think that I need a new husband. What do you think about being my husband? She just blurts it out there. C starts saying, why are you calling the Morgan Mab? I'm sorry. You're right. I'm calling her Mab because I'm covering Dresden Files, and Mab is a factor in that. Morgan. Sorry. You would think that having reread this, I would, like the previous couple chapters, that I would remember that, but no. I call it rape. She has power over him. I think that's fair. Yeah, the power differential is definitely a massive factor. So all she does basically is sit down, have a beer, and be like, what do you think about getting married, getting hitched, essentially? Being my consort. And he spits his beer out, and she says, oh, I'm sorry, I must have surprised you. She tries to justify this proposition by saying that obviously Atticus is a good fighter. Atticus is at least like approaching the same level as all of the other immortals, because he has found a secret for eternal youth. That he is more powerful than two of the gods so far that he has managed to kill. And the fact that she has the kind of status that she does, if she chooses him as her consort, nobody's going to say shit about it to her, which I think is probably true. He pushes for some details after getting over his initial shock. His questions are basically about how much of his own life he gets to keep. he asks where he would need to be. And she's like, oh, you would have to be in Tir na Nog. Like, you'd have all kinds of responsibilities and duties there. And he's like, well, I like it here, though. There's a lot of, like, there, especially in this era, a lot of changes and advancements. There's technology. There's all kinds of things to learn. And also, I have my dog, and I have my my apprentice, essentially, and initiate. That's the word he uses. And I would really like to be able to take those things with me at the very least, because they're a big part of my life at this moment. And she's basically like, you can take Oberyn. I'm not going to say no to Oberyn. But if you take your initiate, I can't offer her any kind of protection. She doesn't have magic. Not yet, anyway. She isn't, protected really in any way inherently the way that you are, but via whatever magic you've got. And she will be really easy pickings for all of the immortals and fae and whatever that are out there. The whole thing would put her in danger. And he's like, well, I gave my word, though, my promise that I'd fully train her. And she says, bring her if you must, then. I cannot guarantee her safety. But you can guarantee mine and Oberyn's? Brighid shrugged. There is no need. You are able to take care of yourself. Ooh, yeah, that's the moment. Like, initially, I'm kind of like, oh, dude, I know you don't want to commit, but, like, honestly, this is so rad, and you just kind of should do it. But once she said that, I was like, okay, yeah, she's playing that fucking word game that they love fucking the letter of the law, don't they? Immortals and fae. So as soon as she says that, both him and Oberyn kind of stop and are like, And what he says is so lovely in its wording. This is a most generous offer, and yet wholly unexpected. To become the consort of one's own goddess is beyond the scope of any man's ambition. I confess myself unprepared to give you an answer at this moment, for much may depend on my response, and I feel it would be irresponsible of me to provide one without giving all ramifications their due examination. So, at this point, she's planning, obviously, to play on his lust, and jumps up to him and grabs his dick. And it is not hard as she expected. And he has to be like, well, I'm really tired and maybe later. And she's close enough at this point that she smells something off. And she rips his shirt down the front and pulls it back and sees all of the rips and scratches that the Morrigan left. See, I almost said Mab again. And at this point, completely loses her cool and shoots fire at him, intending to kill him. Which, this is like one of those things that I have a bit of a question on, because like there is an implication in something like the Dresden Files, and even in something like Song of Ice and Fire, that breaking guest right is punishable by greater powers. Now, if she were immortal, I would assume those greater powers would be the immortals. But she is an immortal. So is she held to any sort of standard on this? The fact that he says, well, we can just keep this to ourselves, leads me to think not. But that sucks, that it's only about like the understanding of who has the power in the scenario. And that there is no real recourse or any like any sort of supernatural alarm bell that goes off when somebody does something like this. Because she came in, she agreed to be his guest, he gave her a drink, he did all of the things that you're meant to do when you are establishing that somebody is your guest and technically under your protection, and that you are under the protection of being their host. He's ticked the boxes. So the fact that she feels free to do this really is brazen. And she fully intended to kill him. The fire that he absorbs via his amulet burns him. The amulet does the thing that it did with the other curse that managed to be diffused by his magic. And she manages to at least burn him in that sense, but not injure him in any other way except for setting his cabinets on fire. He pulls the sword out of the sheath on his back. It's the sword of truth, the one that she has to answer truthfully if she is at its blade, which is one of my favorite conceits. I really like this whole idea. Anything that forces people to tell the truth, I find fascinating, because you can learn so much about a person based on what they'll say and not say, even when they know that they are under coercion. Because she tries to like keep it from him, even so, what she actually intends, and does not, of course, succeed in doing this, but it shows you how duplicitous she is, that she's still trying to lie. So at first she tries to say that he swore he'd never wield this sword against her. And he's like, yeah, and you just tried to kill me, so I'm pretty sure that kind of releases me from any obligation to you. And then she tries the, you dare to threaten me, a guest in your home. And he's like, no, you don't get to pull that shit. You just tried to kill me. Again, you keep acting like you're just trying to kill me. Didn't happen. And then when he asks her to put out the fire on the cabinets, she's just like, well, maybe I should just let it burn. And he's like, well, that would be really rude, because I know that you can put it out super easily. And maybe put it out so we can talk peacefully. And she's like, oh, really peacefully with a sword at my neck? And he's like, yeah, because you just flipped your shit, and I can't trust that you aren't going to do that immediately after I lower the sword. So that's what's going to happen. So she finally puts out the fire, and he summarizes all the bullshit that she just did. And she acts like, well, you left out the part where you fucked Mab. And he's like, no, I didn't leave that part out. That happened before you got here, before you made any overture to me. I am not bound to you in any way, nor am I bound to Morgan, by the way. I am a free man who can do what he wants. And she tries to say that he gave her cause. And he's like, no, I didn't. If I had agreed to be your consort first and then fornicated with the Morrigan in front of you with Def Leppard on the stereo, then that would have been cause to incinerate me on the spot. But I am a free man, and I gave you no such cause. Beyond that, I cannot fathom why you'd react like a jilted high school girl. This wasn't done out of jealousy, was it? No, I was not motivated by jealousy. I thought not. And did you propose that I become your consort out of any true affection for me? No. Of course not. Before we get to the real reason you asked me to be your consort, I would like to address your accusation. If I were truly the Morrigan's creature, as you put it, then I could have killed you already, and indeed I should have and would have. He mentions the fact that she regenerated his ear, and Brighid says something about how she didn't know that he had lost it, and he's like, yep. By the way, I lost it in the mountains when I was killing Angus Og for you, and I know that Flittish fucking kidnapped Oberyn to make sure I showed up, because you asked her to. And then he says something that I think is pretty cutting in its very specific way. I love this little monologue that he has here. Brighid says something about how the Morrigan wishes to be supreme in Tir na Nog, and she's using you to make it happen. You are no better, I pointed out. You wish to be supreme, and you would use me the same way. I'm disgusted with you both. And you know what really chaps my hide here is that you've come down so dramatically from your pedestal. I can't even have a proper crisis of faith and vacillate between the image of perfection and my shattered illusions because you've left no doubt that there is nothing divine about your nature. Do you not see how you've debased yourself? Or do you persist in thinking that you acted justly in trying to kill me? Wait, don't answer that yet. And he pushes it a little bit to find out why she tried to use fire. and comes to the conclusion that she doesn't know about the protection built into his amulet. Not really. She knows there's power there, but not like the extent of it, and assumed that her magic would be strong enough to overcome it. So then he asks, what will you do when I release you from Fraggle Rock? And she has to wait until the spell on the sword forces her to reply, and says, I will tear the amulet from your neck and set you on fire once you are unprotected. I sighed. Well, that puts us in a very awkward position, doesn't it? And he finally finishes with, any humiliation you feel is justly deserved because you have behaved inexcusably. We've already established it was your actions, not mine, that breached hospitality. You're behaving like a petulant child and not taking responsibility for your actions like one of the blasted Olympians. And I would like to point out that you have not suffered publicly. No one knows what you've done. It can remain our secret, and I think that is a breach we can mend. Are you willing to negotiate peace, or are you resolved that I must die for imagined offenses? Release me, and I will negotiate with you. I laughed at her. I wasn't born yesterday, as the people here are fond of saying. For perhaps a short time you will negotiate. After that you will try to kill me, correct? Yes, she admitted, after trying in vain to resist answering. I thought as much. So you see, I must keep you under the spell to ensure you negotiate in good faith. Then she tries to say that, well, I don't get that assurance. And he's like, yeah, and you won't get it. You're the one who tried to kill me in my own home. I don't know you fucking jack shit. And he finally ends it with, I need you to know that you seem to be sure Mab is going to employ me to reign supreme in Tir Nanog, and that I am going to help her with that, or that I am going to support her. And the truth is, I think it would be better if you ran things. I am on your side in a way, except for the fact that you've tried to pull this shit here with me. And I kind of like that he's like, if you hadn't pulled things, if you hadn't handled everything like this, you might have had an ally. I already did some shit for you that was crazy. You know, Angus Og was no fucking joke. And I took that on because you needed the help. And because I worship you. And because you were, you know, my goddess. And now you're over here trying to force shit out of me, acting like I'm betraying you for no reason. Like, she's acting like Morrigan doesn't have any power over him in any way. She doesn't know about the deal that he made with Morrigan. We know this. So she's operating under the assumption that Morrigan could kill him at any time, pretty much, or at least take his life. And still thinks that he's at like an equal position here. So she finally says, I've breached hospitality with you in an egregious manner. Please accept my sincerest apologies for my behavior. I will not attempt to harm you or my hound, and I will never seek vengeance for the humiliation I have suffered. However, I cannot promise we will never come into conflict over other matters. What do you think might bring us into conflict in the future? Any liaison you have with the Morrigan. Why? Should I not be able to liaise with whomever I wish? And she's basically like, I mean, if you want, but it does not look like you had that good a time. So really what it comes down to is that I think you're going to help usurp me. And he admits, finally, I did swear to her that I would teach her the secret of the amulet and that I wouldn't teach anybody else. And she starts to take this as confirmation of what she feared. But he's like, listen, it's going to take her literal centuries to do this. So you can calm down because you still have time to learn how it works. And I will let you look at it and try and figure it out, even if I can't teach you anything about it. She tries to get out of him what the exchange is that they've worked out, but he does not tell her. And let's see, how does this... Oh, right. He says that rather than becoming her consort, In exchange for his killing Angus, he would like her forgiveness for everything that has happened today. I look forward to your next visit and hope it will be much more congenial than this one. I shall not break hospitality again, Brighid said as she rose to her feet, but neither shall you hear again and offer like you heard today. All of this, she cupped her breasts briefly, could have been yours, Druid, but no more. Think on that the next time the Morrigan is gouging out the pieces of your flesh. She made sure I saw plenty of what I'd be missing on her way out the door. Damn, damn, damn. So, yeah, good on you, Atticus, because honestly, I was pretty seduced by the idea of him becoming like the consort to a fucking goddess in Tir na Nog. That's just such a crazy, awesome idea. I low-key kind of still want it to happen. So then we go on to chapter 15, and this is when he gets a call from Hal. Hal, the werewolf lawyer. And he calls up and is essentially immediately like, okay, what the fuck did you do with the nightclub, which I had forgotten was called Saturn. They're calling it the Saturn Massacre. And Atticus is like, what? Nothing. And Hal's like, fuck, Atticus, are you kidding me? But when he does show up, he notices Atticus's ear is healed. And he's like, oh, no shit. Okay. Well, that's an enormous piece of the puzzle that has been wiped away here, because everybody saw you being arrested. Like, because the cops had him on the ground outside the club, if you guys remember. And he just slowly had like each of the things that he was carrying disappear, so they couldn't see the sword and they couldn't see the baseball bat and all this stuff, which I just find so funny. And everybody saw a guy who matches Atticus's description, except he was face down, so they didn't like see his tattoos. And they did see that he was missing an ear. And there are enough witnesses saying this that it's really like taken as basically a given that that's true of whomever was involved in this whole thing. So the fact that Atticus's ear has been healed is a giant boon and just came in the nick of time. And Hal is here to warn him that he has all of these, well, not that he has, that there are all of these cops that are going to be heading over, because they already have like looked at Atticus as a person of interest in some other stuff. And this description matches him so well, other than the busted ear, that they're going to have a full warrant and do everything by the book, coming in the house and going through it from top to bottom. So any sword that Atticus has, he's going to have to get rid of. And so he takes the two swords outside and manages to cover them with a glamour and hide them up in the tree branches that hang over from his neighbor's yard over his yard, which is a pretty awesome hiding place, to be honest. I thought for a second that he was going to bury them, but we hear later that one of the cops like goes out into the garden and looks around for freshly turned earth, because apparently burying things is just something a lot of people do. And hiding something up in a tree that it has no business being able, like a tree that has no business supporting the weight of swords, never mind a full-grown man climbing up there to fasten them down. That's pretty good, man. I like this whole concept. So when he gets this news, he calls up Gran, and it turns out that they have this thing set up between the two of them that was all her idea. And I really enjoy the fact that this was her idea and that she handles it so well as he's talking to her, that he once again is really impressed with how good a choice he made in taking her on as his initiate. Because she came up with the idea that there are going to be a lot of times probably where Atticus is in trouble and he's going to need to establish some kind of alibi, and that he's more than likely being wiretapped by who knows whom. So if they can do it, they should use the phone to establish alibis so that whomever in question that's listening to their conversation will hear it in a seemingly unguarded conversation, and it will be confirmed that there's no way they could have had anything to do with it. So the code phrase is, "Can I tell you one of the many reasons I love you?" And then the other person says, "Sure." And then you just explain what we did last night and where and so on, putting in something cute or lovey-dovey for verisimilitude, and bam, you've slipped an alibi right past the ears of the military-industrial, authoritarian douche canoe complex. So that's what he decides to do this time around, in order to come up with an alibi for when they were supposedly, allegedly, at the Saturn nightclub beating the shit out of and killing Maenads. So what it is that they were playing baseball with Oberon, and there are some baseball bats in her trunk, and yeah, how many balls do you think we hit? I was so proud I could have popped. Such a clever mind. We had a dozen, I replied. And don't forget, those 2 bats are still in the trunk of your car. Oh, are they? I don't remember. Are those yours, or do I need to return them to someone? So quick, she knew precisely what to ask. Those are mine. The wooden ones are mine, the Wilsons. The aluminum bats were the borrowed ones. I've already returned them. Oh, is that all? That's it. The balls and bats are in your trunk, and you're my snooky wookie marshmallow fudge love pie. Aww. Wait, did you just call me a Wookiee? So that was a pretty good, plot. I'm not sure how well that works. I mean, my main question on something like that is whether or not whoever is listening ever addresses to you that they heard your alibi. Because you're not supposed to be being wiretapped, right? So I imagine that if this does work, he's not going to know that it worked. It's just going to be something that, if they pulled a recording of it, he'd be able to point to it. But it's the sort of thing that I'm not sure either side can really show their hand on that. He does go to the cops with that same story, and now they have established between the two of them what they're going to say happened. But it's a really, it's a good policy, I think, to have a way to set the story straight between the two of you without you calling up and being like, okay, if anybody asks, here's what happened last night. It's done in just such a way that I think they can get away with it. So, then he gets a call from Melina, who tells him that it was poorly handled last night. And he's basically not here for another fucking lecture. I think he's kind of had it, to be honest, which I don't blame him for. And he's like, yeah, you know what I think was poorly handled is the fact that you told me that there was going to be 12 and there were 15. So, and one of them got away, which is not as bad as it could have been. And when she asks, if he has any idea where she went off to, he's just like, nah, sorry. But she does say, let's see. Well, I can't help next time. If that last one wanted to fight, I'm not sure I could have taken her. What news of the Hexen? We've managed to bid farewell to 2 of them. From your condo? Even so. She sounded a bit smug. You knew them previously? No, these were younger members, not so well protected and not so wise about masking their true nature. That told me that Melina didn't necessarily need hair or blood to deliver a lethal attack from afar, and she knew how to pick magic users out of a crowd. Good to know. That is good to know. You know, we were treating the hair that she was collecting whenever anybody came near her apartment as a sort of weapon in itself, which it is, but we were treating it as if him not allowing her spell to gather hair from his head was him completely sidestepping any danger. And it turns out that ain't true, folks. She could still get at his ass, I think, depending on exactly how she was able to target these 2. it might be that she was able to target them using something like that traces their magic. And I don't know if the nature of their magic is different from the magic of a druid. So she may not be able to use the same method with Atticus, but then again, she may. So who knows? And she tells him that she's narrowed down the neighborhood that they are in to Gilbert, but that they need more bloodwort for the spell. So he has to get on that. And tells him that he should try subtlety sometime. So as he's getting off the phone with her, this is when Hal shows up, tells him that he's a lucky bastard, warns him about everything, and he hides all of his stuff. And they're in the middle of like wondering whether they can hide all of the other shit in his garage because he's got a lot of weapons. And he thinks that he has maybe a couple hours, maybe only a few minutes. As he's saying this, all the cars show up. So it turns out they don't have any time at all. And they managed to just get the swords hidden in time. And I kind of liked, there's a brief conversation because I told you all that I was on the side of the werewolves in terms of when Atticus asks for help. The werewolves are basically like, hey, go fuck yourself. We already tried to help you. 2 of our guys died, I think. Something like that. Others got pretty badly hurt. This is not a fucking joke for us. We aren't your private army. And we're not going to help you unless there's like some danger to us. Your affairs are not our affairs. And in this scene, Hal says something to Atticus about like, well, you shouldn't have tried to do this on your own. And Atticus is like, well, fuck you. I asked for your help. And he's like, I said you shouldn't do this on your own. I did not say that you should have asked for our help. Those are not the same thing, my friend. You need to figure out your own shit with your own people is what I'm saying to you. My remonstrance about acting alone is not an offer. And I really liked that because still highly team werewolf on this. Like Atticus, just because somebody's got power in your vicinity doesn't mean that they're invested in the same things as you. They don't need to worry about the same stuff that you do. And their priorities are more than likely going to be really different. And it's not like, I didn't get the feeling at least. And this could be something that I am misremembering from the last book. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember Atticus laying down a huge amount of magic to protect the wolves. I feel like he essentially kept their scent from being detectable. And that was about it, right? Because he assumes that they're going to be able to take care of themselves. So that's another factor that I would definitely be taking into account were I somebody that Atticus is asking for help. Is like, how much are you going out of your way to ensure that I'm going to be okay at the end of this since I'm doing you a favor? And understandably, he wants to keep his resources as untapped as he can in order to be able to protect himself and accomplish whatever goal he's here for. But you've got to keep in mind, dude, that not everybody's going to be willing to put it on the line the way that you are. So here come the cops, and here comes Atticus turning on the most ridiculous persona. Now, I have such mixed feelings about his stupid surfer dude type persona. Basically, I'm saying surfer dude when what I really mean is pothead, right? Like, he is acting like a burnout stoner who barely can keep it together. I feel like this is the wrong play. Not necessarily in the immediate moment, but more long term. When they ask him if he owns a business and how successful it is, there feels like there's something pointed about that. And I don't blame them for being surprised that somebody with the apparent lack of intellect that he displays when they question him would be able to run a successful business. I would never expect it. The dude can't focus for more than like 5 minutes on the conversation. He pretends to space out a couple times. And I'm supposed to believe that this dude can like, you know, keep track of inventory and do accounting and all of this. It would really raise my eyebrows, I guess. I was going to say raise my hackles, but that's a little too aggressive. So I feel like he is doing something that in the short term is effective for getting them off his case, but in the long term is going to be in and of itself suspicious. We'll see if that bears fruit, but he also gets Oberyn to pretend to be a really sweet, unassuming little doggy because he is supposed to be a different dog from the one that Atticus lost, in quotes, lost. He got new papers and new tags for Oberyn and is pretending that he is a different dog now, which I want to know if he gave him a new name, like what his fake new name is. Let's see. Seastar is saying, contrary to the impression he previously gave us readers, Atticus is quite willing and able to play stupid. Oh yeah, he is. So yeah, he gives Oberyn those orders. Hal is here just to, you know, be his representation. I did kind of expect the police to be like, do you always just have your lawyer by your side all the time? But I guess, it's not too much of a surprise because Atticus is lawyered up beforehand before. And they go through all of his stuff. They find a bunch of weapons, but everything's coated in dust and looks like it hasn't been used in ages, so they can't really do anything with that. I love the cop. Interesting. I see you have both your ears, Geffert observed. I flicked my eyes uncertainly between him and Hal. Thanks? And so do you. And then pulls this whole thing about how his sword was stolen. And he purposefully keeps it vague, where on the one hand, he says that the sword maybe got stolen while he was playing baseball with Gran and Oberyn. On the other hand, he's saying that maybe he just lost it. In general, trying to keep things as unfocused as he can so that they're not able to pin him into a corner with one particular story, which is a smart move that I don't know I would have thought to make. I think I might have just stuck with the one story of like, oh yeah, it was stolen at this point in the and that's probably a mistake because then they can sort of like zero in on that and question you hard on that and find little gaps in your story. But if you keep being like, I don't know, maybe I was doing this, but I might have been doing that. And he keeps on talking about how like he's training to be a ninja, and he's saying this with like a deadpan face. If I ever catch who did it, he'd have to deal with my kung fu. Oh my God, Atticus, this is so hard to read. I might be remembering it wrong. I do that sometimes. I lose time when I'm in a ninja trance and I don't recall doing things. The detective's mouth opened a bit and he stared at me as if I were a talking slime mold. I looked down and shuffled my feet a bit. Or maybe it was all those drugs I did when I was younger. Sometimes I black out. Geffert nodded slowly and looked at Hal. Then his eyes abruptly narrowed and he asked, Mr. O'Sullivan, what do you do for a living? Ninja training. That's your source of income. Oh, no, I own a bookstore. Would you say your bookstore is a successful enterprise? I ignored him and let my eyes lose focus at a point over his right shoulder. Mr. O'Sullivan? Huh? What, dude? I'm sorry. I didn't get that. Geffert spoke slowly to make sure I understood. Do you make a lot of money at your bookstore? Oh, you're talking about Benjamin's. Yeah, dude, I have plenty. Enough to pay for expensive lawyers. Well, duh, I said, pointing at Hal. He's standing here, isn't he? Why does a bookstore owner need lawyers like Magnuson and Hawke? Because temp cops keep shooting me for no reason and searching my house for shit I don't have, and then they act all surprised when I actually have both my ears, which is a pretty good comeback, to be honest. And that can't. So here's my future theory here. with me saying, like, I'm not sure how things are going to work out, pretending to be this stupid, but also be running a business, I bet people think that he sells drugs and that the fucking bookstore's like a front or something. That is 100% what I would think if I was dealing with a guy who seemed this stupid. So I heard a clatter coming from the living room and went to investigate. A female detective managed to spill my DVD collection all over the floor. Oh, I said, if you find any porn in there, it isn't mine. I swear. This guy, I can't handle it. Then he tries to say that his cabinets caught fire because he was using a creme brulee torch and got a little too caught up with head banging with the blowtorch in his hand. Wow. That is the lamest shit I've ever heard. That, like, and the cop very, like, questions him on that pretty closely, and it's just like, come on. But he doesn't budge on it. And if I were thinking he was selling drugs, I would think maybe this was like a meth lab explosion or something went wrong, you know, like, yee. Krista is saying same on the trucks. Yeah, like, I feel like that's just where you go, right? So after they leave, he goes out into the yard and uses the energy to fix his scratches and bruises and everything from his Morrigan encounter. And then Gran calls and says that rabbi and priest are back and that they are not leaving until they can talk to him, which is really annoying. So he heads over there on his bike and he's trying to think about, like, who these guys could be, because they seem to know something about him, but they clearly don't know where he lives, or they wouldn't be showing up at the shop and pushing it about seeing him the way that they are. And the fact that they're really pushing to see certain books means that they must have some kind of power of their own, because they're able to sense how powerful those books are and how important they are. So he's riding there on his bike and he sends home everybody so that he can speak to these guys alone, because he's just got a sense that things are not going to go super well here. And one of these dudes, let's see, what do you want? I asked the rabbi when the door had closed. He was clearly the boss and the badass of the two. The priest was a public relations man. We want to examine your rare books, he said in his clipped Russian accent. I shook my head. They're not for sale. For research purposes, Father Gregory interjected. What kind of research? Magic and the occult. I'd suggest a library for that kind of thing. The rabbi was about to respond when his eyes shifted to the door. Hal walked in, and the rabbi's eyes bulged and his face twisted into a snarl. It seemed something malodorous was about to hit the fan, and I'd already had enough of that. I quickly confirmed the rabbi was wearing natural fibers and crafted a binding between his jacket sleeves and his sides so that his arms would be frozen in place. The rabbi was fast, though. As I was speaking the binding, he whipped a silver throwing knife out of his jacket, shouted, "Die, wolf!" in Russian. The binding took effect as he reared back his arm to throw, and the result was that he abruptly sank the knife into the carpet by his foot, and Hal didn't die. So this is pretty intense. I am just concerned by this. These dudes have figured out how to spot a werewolf when he is in human form. And I'm not talking about just how to spot, like, there's a lineup. It's a split second. He looks up and immediately knows. That bothers me a lot, because I doubt he's the only one out there who can do that, which means that we've got a threat against Hal and his people, potentially, which could be what is needed to motivate Hal to get involved in Atticus's bullshit this time around, after all. But yeah, this dude is straight up ready to murder a man in this bookstore. with no hesitation at all, whips a knife out and is going to stab a motherfucker in a public place. Like, it's a privately owned business, but the door is open. Any fucking body can walk in at any second, and this guy does not care. That is extremely alarming behavior. I do not care for it. And the binding that Atticus has put on them, eventually he does it so that, like, the knees of their pants are bound to the carpeting as well. So they are not able to move up off the floor, which I found hilarious. And Hal leaves, like, just managing to keep hold of his temper. And Atticus sort of leaves these two on the floor, kneeling. I think you guys might be the worst customers ever. Not only do you badger my employees and force me to interrupt an incredibly relaxing day to come deal with you, wink, wink, but you try to murder another customer when he walks through the front door and then complain when I prevent you from committing a capital crime. Come on, Padre, what would Jesus do? He'd rain fire down upon you for consorting with the minions of hell. Whoa, slow down there, Father. I think you've made several giant leaps of logic of faith, and I'm not following. First, I don't know any minions of hell. Second, I don't consort with anyone because I'm not fond of that word. Haha, get it? Consort. And third, have you ever actually talked to Jesus? Because I have, and he's not really a rain fire down upon bookstores kind of guy, just so you know. Which is pretty amusing that he can say things like, listen, I talked to Jesus. Straight up, he would not be down with this shit. You have no idea who you're dealing with, the rabbi seethed. Well, yeah, hence the nature of my query, which is a great sentence that I need to put in my pocket and remember. Hence the nature of my query. Hence the nature, it's so good. Hence the nature of my query is going to be a thing that I bring forth at one point or another, and it's going to be deeply satisfying, and I am already excited for it. So here comes a fucking creepy ass description of this man's beard. His beard seemed to be unusually active for a collection of facial hair. When a fully bearded man is talking, you expect a certain amount of twitching about the edges as his jaw moves around. But when the rabbi stopped talking, his personal topiary kept moving. Hey, do you have some roaches living in your beard or what? The movement stopped as soon as I mentioned it. I turned on my fairy specs, and it looked like a normal beard. The silver knife, though, thrust into the carpet, drew my attention. It was glowing with some extra juju, but oddly enough, only on the hilt, not the blade itself. So, what in the fuck is up with this guy's beard? I can't even begin to, and the fact that he sort of used a version of the site in order to look and it still didn't show up anything strange, I don't know what to think about that. I am really creeped out by it, though. Anything that has lots of independently moving parts creeps me the fuck out. Hardcore. There was a podcast I was listening to recently where they cover bad movies, and they covered The Meg, which is short for Megalodon, I think, and it's a movie about a giant, prehistoric shark. And one of the hosts said that this movie falls into the trap for him personally, where the thing is too large to be afraid of. And I kind of agree with that sentiment, that if there is a monster that's too big, there is a sense that there are places you can go that are too small for it to get to. Maybe it can bash through them, like if it's King Kong and you hide in a small tunnel, it can break open the ground and pull you out from the tunnel that way. But it's not nimble and not able to turn quickly and find you easily is the vibe that I always get. Something like this, where it feels basically like the Bugman from Men in Black, who's made up of a bunch of different bugs living inside of a person suit. That shit is so much worse. I cannot adequately express how creepy this moving beard is to me. I hate everything about it and just kind of want to never return to this or find out what the truth is. I don't want to know. I take back all of my previous curiosity. Ugh, no thanks. So Atticus checks out this knife, and it turns out that it's got some kind of like power over it that if anybody but the rabbi picks it up, it will hurt them in some way. He doesn't know exactly what that is, what the magic does, but he is aware it's there and is able to undo it before picking it up so that the rabbi watches him, waiting for him to pick it up and get hurt. And he's able to just sort of like toss it hand to hand and be like, wow, nice knife, and put it away. And the rabbi is like horrified at the fact that this isn't doing anything to him. So let's see. I'm trying to find. Oh yeah, here it is. He's looking at the spell and realizes that it's Kabbalistic. And he hasn't had a lot of like encounters with Kabbalistic magic. So later on, he winds up having to add some specific protections to his shop to cope with this sort of magic. I'd run into a few Kabbalists here and there over the centuries, but they'd always been amiable sorts, and I'd never had cause to think of them as antagonists until now. This enchantment was still active because essentially it didn't meet the definition of magic according to my existing wards. I was near certain it was naughty, especially if this would-be killer rabbi wanted me to touch it. So I directed the attention of my standing wards to the knife hilt and expanded my definition of magic to include the Kabbalistic tree of life. So that's a pretty cool thing. And when he picks it up and takes hold of it, later on, he gives it to Hal to investigate who these guys are using some private investigator and maybe using the knife to like narrow things down. So the rabbi is trying to keep the priest from making nice with Atticus. Because Atticus is like, listen, if I were a bad guy, I could have killed y'all. You're in my place. I've got wards up, yada, yada, yada. How about I make a cup of tea and we sit and talk? And the rabbi is screaming, don't trust him. His temper may be short, the priest admitted, but he was right to attack the wolf. What wolf? The man who entered the store was a werewolf. You cannot pretend you didn't know this. Well, so what if he was? He was in human form and he wanted to buy a book. That's no reason to kill him. Werewolves must be slain on sight. Says who? The rabbi was thrashing about in his jacket, trying to get his arms free by pulling the whole cloth of the fabric over his head. This is so funny. I want to see this on camera. Like, this just sounds hilarious to me. So then he presses about witches and vampires, which he confirms he does not suffer to live either of them. He makes sure that Atticus is who I mean by he. Atticus makes sure to get a real measure of these guys and what they think is good and evil. And then says like, well, who do you think it is that you're talking to exactly? And he calls Atticus a holy man. Didn't you just say a couple minutes ago that Jesus was going to rain fire down on me? There will be a reckoning for the time you've spent associating with infernal powers, but we recognize that you follow the old path of the Druids. My eyebrows shot up. They knew what I was after all. And where does it say that Druids associated with infernal powers? Because we don't. It was Druidic magic that opened a portal to hell in the Superstition Mountains, and you were there. So they know all about what happened here. So he explains to them about Angus trying to summon demons and how some of them got away, that he killed them, that he just pursued Bazazel and killed him. And when he gets to that part, they're like, oh, come on, you didn't kill a fallen angel. At least the rabbi's like that. The priest is more impressed and seems to believe him. But the rabbi is just like, no, he isn't strong enough. That's stupid. So I'm willing to let you guys walk out the door with nothing lost but a knife and a little bit of dignity, but I don't want to see you again. You're not welcome here, and I'm never going to show you my books. I don't sell them to fanatics of any stripe. When it comes to hell, we're on the same side. Can we agree to that? I cannot speak for everyone, Gregory said, casting a meaningful glance at the rabbi squirming in front of him. But for my part, I am satisfied. So at this point, the rabbi finally gets freed of his jacket and begins a chant and some hand movements to cast some kind of spell. And Atticus knows that this isn't going to work. So he just sort of sits back and lets him do it, and which I find very amusing. And as soon as he finished and tried to execute it, the shop's wards would recognize it and shut it down. The priest glanced at me nervously as his colleague chanted, wondering if I was going to do anything, but all he saw was my air of unconcerned. "Ha!" the rabbi cried when he finished. He closed his eyes and tilted his head back, fists clenched and held out at 9 and 3 like he was driving a big rig, waiting for something to happen. Maybe he thought an angel would appear and kick my ass, or grant him strength, or give him a special brownie. After a couple of seconds of expectant heaving of the breast, he opened his eyes, turned his head, and saw me smirking at him. "Nice try, Rabbi Yosef." I released the binding on the priest's clothes and said, "You're free to go, Father Gregory. If you ever return, I will not be so polite or forgiving. This is your only warning." "Understood," the priest said. That is so funny to me. Somebody trying to do magic, and not even just trying, but like, this is clearly somebody for whom magic has worked just fine in the past, and he has not encountered someone apparently with the kind of wording that Atticus has. So he ain't ready. So yeah, they kind of have this like uneasy truce where they're like, well, we're still going to go up against forces of evil. And he's like, yeah, evil as you see it, whatever. And Atticus, when he leaves, transforms himself into an owl so that he can fly home instead of risking them watching him and following him to his house. So that is the end of the chapter, pretty much, is him heading home. And I don't know what to make of these two. They're obviously coming back, but I don't know what factor they're going to be in this overall story. So I enjoy them, though, because they're so weird and mismatched, you know? Like, the one of them is just so volatile and angry, and the other is much more reasonable, but still has unreasonable beliefs. It's just that he's measured in how he handles things. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I always enjoy, especially, mismatched pairs of people, specifically like this. I think that's a kind of fun trope. So yeah, that's about it for this episode. So thank you again to Rosalie for commissioning this. And, I'm just seeing that C Star lost me for a second. I'm sorry about that. And yeah, I'm hoping that somebody will commission the next chapters. So, if you're interested in doing that, you can do it at unspoiledpodcast.com/shop. And I will be doing the live coverage of the first episode of season 2 of Veronica Mars shortly. So if you are interested in that, join me in 15 minutes. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.